So we're going to keep this conversation going with educators who are already talking, so they've got a lot to say. I want to get right to it. Margie Van Dieven is still with us. Also with us, Ed Johnson, principal of Brentwood High School. Ed, thanks for being here. And the Teacher of the Year for 2012-2013 out of Afton. That's right. That deserves applause. English teacher, correct? Yes, Kathy Cartier from Afton High School. And welcome back to the program, Barrett Taylor, now assistant principal, Compton Drew Middle School.
Correct.
Barrett, what do these tests mean to you as an educator? What do these results mean to you? What do you make of all this?
I think it's a measure of what we're doing and what we need to work on. I respect the test. At the same time, I think that there are other things that tests don't measure, but I think they are important.
Teachers teaching to the test, you hear that a lot. The test, what do you make of them? Are they important to the educators on the ground?
Well, I'd have to say that, you know, when you decide to go into a teaching career, you don't say, hey, I think I could get that state assessment up another %. You know, you basically go into teaching because you love your subject. And that's why I went into teaching. I love literature, I love the craft of writing, and so I go in hoping that my kids will love the craft of writing and that I can help them be successful. But the test is an important benchmark for parents. Assessments need to improve teaching and learning. So hopefully that MAP test is improving teaching and learning and is helpful to the students as well, because assessment should be for students first of all. So I do think it's important. I think we're always going to have to be accountable. Accountability is inevitable because we have a lot of stakeholders, but I don't think teachers love high stakes tests.
As you're chomping at the bit there, don't let me interrupt you, but we have the scores right here. Brentwood is doing some amazing things.
Right.
Is what you're doing in Brentwood, is that something that we should just be replicating in Normandy? Would it work in other schools?
So I'm from a smaller school district, so I don't know if you can necessarily replicate it, but the focus is college and career readiness, okay? And so we work from that thought in everything we do. So it's standards that we know that are important, okay? Both academic, but there's also standards, you know, like 21st century skills that we also value and we think are important. So it's a meshing of a lot of different skills and standards that we think put together the whole student that is hopefully ready for a post-secondary pursuit of a really nice career. But teachers for us, I gotta put a plug in for my teachers. If it's about what we're doing, their work, all of our teachers care, and we have a focus to commitment to every single last kid in the building. And so we know our kids intimately, and we know that everything's about relationships. So quality contact with your students is absolutely essential, and our teachers are just amazing at that.
You mentioned every student, and Margie, I'd like to get your thoughts on this too. Brentwood is doing a better job than a lot of schools at this, but when you break down the scores and you look at the students who are receiving free and reduced lunch and how they perform compared to their peers, even in school districts that are doing really well overall, the scores are always lower for our students on the free and reduced lunch plan if you want to separate out the numbers that way. Why is that? And what can we do about it?
Well, we want to try to leverage whatever it is that presents those kids with difficulty. And so what's important is that you not only know your kids from a data perspective, but you also know your kids as human beings. And you got to get inside of them and figure out what makes them tick. And so there's certain things that you can do through the process of building a relationship with kids to encourage and empower them to overcome whatever it is that's serving as an obstacle or a barrier so that they can access learning better. So it's about being able to leverage certain things that are unfortunate things that kids are dealt with.
You know, as Barrett said, the test doesn't measure everything. So I have a number of kids maybe who are would be considered free and reduced lunch. We have probably about 43% in the Afton School District, but they make great strides that maybe aren't as obvious when we look at test scores. And so you have to consider where they began. And I would have to say that we have some fabulous teachers too, and we collaborate by looking at those standards. I think the rigorous standards, we're all glad to have more rigorous standards, and we look at those standards. We may not like the high stakes test, or we may not think it's the most authentic test, or we may think a lot of things about the test, but the standards are good, and we take them and we break them down and we say, what does this mean? And now what will be evidence that our kids have learned this, and how can we work together to figure out the best instruction to get them there? And you know, that big word differentiation, you know, we have to customize learning for kids, and everybody's going to have different progress. So what that looks like for you on that paper, I see faces, you're seeing numbers, and those kids are still making progress as well.
But does the test measure that, or can the test measure that progress? From the time they walk in the door in the beginning of school until the time they leave that year, even if they're not at above state averages, but they've still gone a long way.
I think that maybe my student came in and was below basic, but when they left, they were in the basic category, so there was progress there. And they need, you know, everybody learns at a different pace as well, and so I think that in many ways, some of the vertical alignment that we're doing with our other buildings, the middle school, for instance, for me, are helping us to see how we can, you know, help kids learn and scaffold and intervene when there's some needs there that are showing a deficit.
I could add on that too, that sometimes what you see in the general public with looking at just the proficiency rates, you might not be able to see that growth of the individual child, but the department does calculate a growth measure for each child, which is converted. It looks at the scale score, it looks at prior test scores, and they're able to calculate whether or not that child met or exceeded the growth trajectory for the individual child. So we do look at that. Okay. That's a component that's included in the MSIP-5 APR calculation, but we continue to focus, you know, it's just easier for the general public to understand proficiency rates. So the general public might not see that, but we're very cognizant of the need to look at every child and where they are on that growth trajectory.
And I want to point out, we have some really great proficiency rates. Like you said, the numbers are easy to understand. You got Kirkwood here at 89% and then some of the students. Brentwood, 87% proficient. Clayton, Ladue, Webster Groves, Lindbergh, 84. These are kind of the usual suspects here. But I think obviously the elephant in the room is that it's not that way for everyone. You've got 75% is the number in Normandy, and it's not on the positive side. It's 75% and then some are not proficient. You know, we're looking in the 20s, even in the 12s on some areas.
So I guess I'd like to respond to that by saying our first goal of the Top 10 by 20 plan is that all Missouri children will graduate college and career ready. And as so I'm going to play the new card, the new commissioner for a while, I've said that's probably the biggest challenge that we have in the state is if we mean all, we're going to have to do some things very differently, because we do say demographics do not determine destiny, and then we look at the data. We know our data. We know what our data have said for decades, and the people I meet with and speak with, they're frustrated and tired of talking about how we're going to solve it. So we look back. I've been spending a lot of time talking about or looking into this, and we kind of fall on the art and the science. So as you're talking about, as teachers or educators, we talk about the art and science of teaching. It's very telling when you look at the scientific evidence behind brain development and how the impacts of poverty and trauma on the child and their development. That's one part of it. Then you look at the art of that, and you talk about the climate and the culture that you were addressing, and how do we meet these needs and find kids where they are with holding that high expectation that we need to take them where they need to be successful. And so we cannot do that alone. The educators can't do it alone. This is going to take a mind shift and bringing community together to talk about how do we ensure that we're meeting these kids' needs so that they can come to school ready to learn and ready to be successful.
And do you think parents care if their kids are in a good district? Is there anything, what's in it for the parents in the good district? What do you tell your Brentwood parents if their kids are doing fine? Why should they care if Normandy is accredited or not?
I think a lot of it's modeling. You know, I have great partnership relationships with friends, colleagues in the Normandy and Riverview School District. And they know my passion is to always support to the best that I can, because, you know, in education, it's not just about serving your school. It's also about building a professional network where we all together as one big giant group can service all of the kids in the St. Louis area. So I think a lot of it is just me modeling the fact that, you know, we need to reach out and support these other school districts, and that's basically the way you go about doing it if you're me. I think parents parents trust our professional instincts in our district, and so they trust that we know the right things to do, and they kind of follow our advice on things. So I think just to model certain things is a lot easier than to try to explain why we need to go in and support certain school districts.
Jeffrey Canada, founder of Harlem Children's Home, has this TED Talk, and he leads off where he talks about 50 years ago when I went to school, there were schools that were struggling. Today, those same schools are struggling. And so my whole argument is we have to think differently. So you talked about Riverview, Normandy. We're going to have to do something different in those school districts to support them to help those kids get to where they need to be. If we're talking about 21st century skills. And I think the hard question is, what is it?
That's it.
Some of you, we talked a little bit before the show, some of us have listened to it all, some of us have not had the chance, but it was going around on social media and other places, the This American Life piece. It's an NPR, aired here on St. Louis Public Radio, 2 parts. One week they focused on Normandy. I think their take on things was that integration is a large key. It's something we tried in this country and kind of gave up on. It was too hard, maybe. I don't know. Any thoughts? Yeah. Kathy, did you hear the program? What did you think when you heard it?
I did hear the program, and it was a powerful story about a young girl who her education was very important to her. It was very important to her parent, and so they did what they had to do in order to make sure that she got the best education possible. And it meant having to take a bus 40 minutes to school and then face she knew not what, because she was going to be potentially an outsider, and she had already heard and been to a meeting where some parents were not especially friendly, and so if we're wondering if parents are interested, they definitely are interested in their kids being in the place where they'll get the best education. And I think we said earlier that if the schools are going to be integrated, then maybe our communities are going to have to be a little bit more integrated, and we're going to have a complete change of mind in our city.
It's a paradigm shift. I think it's difficult. I don't think that we want to do that. I mean, all the research shows that kids learn best in schools that are diverse by socioeconomic status and race. But we've not done it yet.
What happened to the test scores in Francis Howe when they took Normandy transfer students?
Yeah, the test scores were unchanged across if you look at them in the aggregate, the test scores were not changed. Now what we haven't been able to do yet is to look at the individual students and see what type of impact changing that environment had on the individual child's score. We haven't been able to really, that takes significant research to make a claim one way or the other that it had significant impact or not. That is certainly a study we're interested in conducting. Does it make a difference, and how do we know?
Do you think integration is a key component that we should be talking about and kind of addressing that head on in education?
I think it certainly has a place, but I think I want to go back to Kathy's point about integration of communities as well, because I heard the story as well. The part that I was concerned that they didn't mention is how strong the desire was for the people in the Normandy school districts who came to the state board on a number of occasions saying, you know, we want to keep schools in our community. Community schools are really important to us, and so you know, it's unfortunate to think that to get a quality education, some students feel they need to get on a bus to go elsewhere. How can we get the system working so that kids have quality schools in their communities?
There are about 30 seconds left.
Okay.
Well, I mean, if you want to know why kids in our school district do well, for the most part, it's because we're a great community school that receives a lot of support from our community. And so kids are comfortable because they know they have support from the community, and that can really provide you with such a great atmosphere that puts everyone in such a great comfort level that it just makes things easy. But, you know, it's unfortunate because we have to see some of our kids from Normandy and Riverview catching the bus in off the Metrolink, and these kids started out at 5:30 in the morning, and so, you know, they'll have a 13, 14-hour day if they've got extracurricular activities going, and for some reason when these kids land in the classroom, we expect them to be on the same playing field as the kids who walk 3 to 5 minutes from home to school. And so when you talk about integration, I mean, it's real easy to throw that out there, but you need to understand for certain kids, it's a real serious hardship being imposed on certain kids just to receive a quality education, and that's unfair.
Mark.